You can't let the orderliness part of you get the upper hand so terribly that it's impossible for you to live. That's what happens to girls who have anorexia, by the way. You know how there's this idea with regards to anorexia that it's often high-achieving girls who have it. Well, it's hyper-conscientious girls. They get so disgust sensitive they can't stand their own bodies. And so, for example, then they stop being able to look at their bodies properly. And so what they do, instead of looking at their whole body, they lose the ability to do that. They only can see parts of their body, and then they can't tell the difference between a part that's healthy and well-shaped and a fat part. And so anything that's what would you call, of dubious, anything that's hard to measure becomes impossible to see. So I had an anorexic client at one point. She wasn't a very big woman, maybe about this big and thin, yes, obviously. And so I was trying to work with her on her body perception disorder, and one of the things I did was, so I had her come and sit beside me. So I was sitting like this, and so was she, and I said, well, you look at our two thighs, which one is bigger? And like mine was like 40% bigger. And she said, well, I can't tell, they look the same to me. And so I said, okay, this is what we're going to do. I let her do it. I said, you take a pencil, and I'll sit on a piece of paper, and you just trace my thigh, okay? And then you can put that piece of paper underneath your thigh and trace it, and then you can look at the difference. Well, so I had her do that, and she looked at the two pieces of paper, and she couldn't believe it. She could not believe that that was actually the case, because her perception had become so disordered that it was impossible for her to see the real shape of her body. And we would go outside, and I would ask her, is that person thin? Is that person fat? And with other people she could tell, but with her own body, not a chance. She couldn't see it properly at all. And so there's a real obsession with purity among women who have anorexia. They'd like to starve themselves right down to the bone, because the bone is sort of pure and white and there's no excess tissue on it. And so anorexia also looks like a disease of disgust. And so it's very, very difficult to, she thought in very black and white terms. One of the things I had her do at one point was, said, she has a music, she said, I either really like a song or I don't like it at all. And I said, okay, well, you've got a music collection. Why don't you go through like 20 of those songs and rate them on a scale from 1 to 10? And she couldn't do it. It was either yes or no, orderly, right? The boundaries around the categories were absolutely segregated. And her apartment tended to be decorated in black and white. And she was hyper clean, so everything in the apartment was extraordinarily orderly, well put away. She couldn't stand to see anything disgusting on the counters and that sort of thing. So very, very difficult disorder to treat, anorexia. Very, very difficult. So, and you can see how it can go wrong, because food, when you're eating, your disgust systems are on alert, like you want the thing you want to eat, and you absolutely don't want the thing you don't want to eat. And your mouth is very sensitive to that sort of thing, to the texture and all of that. And your sense of smell is very sensitive to that sort of thing, because, you don't want to eat anything that's contaminated or poisonous. So it's another situation like sex, where the reward system is driving you forward to engage in a consumatory behavior, but the disgust system is right there modulating and moderating it, and there's a tension between those two things that's always at work. And with the anorexic types, the disgust system gets the upper hand. So she was also extraordinarily judgmental and perfectionistic, but that goes along with it, because orderly people are judgmental and perfectionistic. And so if you're a perfectionist, often what that means is you have very high levels of orderliness and very high levels of neuroticism. And those two things chase each other around like mad, because you can't stand the idea that you would make a mistake, and you get anxious about it as well. So then you get stuck in this perfectionistic mindset and you can't get out of it. So